Hey y'all, it's William from Bags, and welcome to the CashPod, your go-to guide to building a bigger, better, cash-flowing business. Thanks for spending some time with us as we talk about everything growth, mastering your business finances, accessing capital, and doing it all without breaking yourself. You've got me and my Bags co-founders, Daniel and Ignacio, and we want it to feel like we're on your team. Let's secure the bag. In today's episode, we're chatting about how to finish your Q4 right, making good decisions to end the year strong and set yourself up for success in the year to come. Daniel, Ignacio, let's chat.
So very excited today because it's just aligned with the theme of mastering business finance in crunch time. I think for a lot of the founders that we work with and we work closely with, especially in the CPG space, if you're managing inventory, Q4 is crunch time. Q4 is everything. You got things like Black Friday, you have the holidays coming up, you have a lot of different levers you can start pulling when it comes to your business. And I think like the kind of theme that underlies it all is inventory management. Probably not to the customer, but definitely for the businesses. William, you talk a lot about inventory. Can you just give us a quick rundown on the importance of getting your inventory management right?
Yeah, I think no matter what time of year it is, inventory management is going to be a priority. For most CPG businesses, inventory is the thing that requires the most cash out on the way to revenue generation. And we talk a lot about cash conversion cycles, meaning when do you have to spend a ton of money and how long does it take you to realize more money as a result of the money you spent? Around holiday, many CPG brands see their peak. Now, if you're in the sunscreen business or the ice cream business, summer might be your peak rather than holiday. But in a ton of cases, the Black Friday period, the Christmas period is going to be the number one sales opportunity for a business. And so making sure that your website doesn't load up a sold out, that your retail partners aren't calling you saying, I need more, and you say, I don't have more, that's a really fast way to get in trouble. So in Q4, it's important to make sure that you have enough inventory and inventory stability to meet the demand you're going to see, and also that you're planning ahead to the next year so that you don't have sold out signs up for the first quarter of the year to come.
Awesome. I think like a good place to start is with the just like the general diagnosis, which we did touch on a little bit last time we spoke. But I think DT, what's your top tip for looking at your finances? You know, it's early November, Black Friday's coming up end of the month. How do you look at your business? How do you suggest people look at their business at this point in the game to just get a sense of what's going on before they make any decisions?
Well, yeah, it's when Black Friday on the horizon, I think, some of the things that William mentioned around this being sort of the peak season and, that 60% of most brands make 60% of their revenue within this sort of short period of time. And so the first thing that I want to look at is really an understanding of, my current cash on hand, my projected income over the immediate period of time. So in the next 30 days, right? Like what can I really count on that's going to hit my bank account within this period? And then how do I ensure that I am planning effectively on maximizing, things that drive revenue, specifically marketing, because I think during this period of time, really ensuring that you've got the capital to market on top of having on top of having the inventory to fill that demand is what's really, really, really key for a lot of businesses. And I know that's a catch 22. It's like for most companies, it's do I take my money and do I sink it into inventory? Do I take my money and sink it into marketing spend? And the real answer is how do you ensure that you maximize your dollars so that you have both dollars for inventory and marketing? And I think debt has a big part to play in that. And I'm sure we're going to dive into that a little bit more. But the thing that I really try to look at is at the point of sort of beginning of November, how do I get really tactical about where I put my money to drive the highest ROI during that period, one. And then two, especially given we're going to be in an election period where advertising spend might be a little bit expensive. How do I ensure that I'm really maximizing the customers that I do have, right? And trying to get them to increase their average order value to sort of jump the period of time where they're selling to be a little bit earlier. Give the customers that are most loyal to you that extra discount so that they really, really drive home a ton of sales. Like, I really think we're going to start to see a period where brands are going to get super creative in terms of how they market, how they advertise, and then how they maximize their current customer base.
I really love that. And I think like what I'm taking away as well is just like get creative in how you message, get creative in how you sell, but
Yes.
don't get creative with your systems, right? Like your system now is the system that you have locked in. Like it's not the moment to experiment with the variables of inputs and outputs on what you were saying before on your marketing spend or like changing a supplier or no, it's like you know your system, rely on that system, go back to those numbers. Q4 is not the season for experimentation when it comes to the supply and demand. I think it's definitely the place to experiment a little bit more creatively. But yeah, we'll just throwing it back to you. What's your take? Anything you want to look at on top?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that I always understand when I hear it from business owners is the whole "I'm very busy" thing that happens. And obviously, in a period where if you're making 60% of your annual revenue in a 3 month window, that's going to be a busy period. And the effect of that often is the uh, the places that someone needs to focus can shift a little bit. So there's a shift towards making sure the marketing's dialed in, making sure inventory is prepped, and that often leads to a trade-off. So I see a ton of businesses neglect their accounting team during this period, neglect their financial management during this period. And it's understandable when there's so much going on. But when I think about what Q4 offers, what anytime you're driving most of your revenue in the year offers, is an opportunity to have the best financial performance that you will have all year, which is also the best time to go and seek financing for your business. Seeking financing is not an easy thing to do. It doesn't take no time. Often I'll talk to a business in Q1 and they'll say, "Hey, I need to go get capital. I just had a crazy Q4." And it'll be like, "Well, cool. How did January go?" And January is a down month. And that makes accessing capital really, really difficult. So the time to go seek capital is actually after your best month of the year immediately, because that's when you're going to get the best terms and rates.
I love that. And actually, I do want to come back to that, but one thing that you both are bring or have brought up is this like most of your sales for a lot of our customers come in this period, right? Like call it 60% and 25% of the year. I think this, like what you kind of outlined, puts folks in two buckets. It's like that 60% can make up for the rest of the year, or that 60%, if you're doing your financial planning right and looking at the numbers that DT was talking about, actually loads you up for more growth next year. Like it's either a reactive period or in terms of, oh, I have like a ton of things I have to make up for, or a proactive period on like, here's how I'm looking ahead and using that as a boost to grow. But what do you think is, or and this is like just an open question for us, is like, well, how do you go from that reactive piece to actually using the period to set yourself up for more growth than the following year?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And all right, assuming we're diving into a consumer products business specifically, right? There is always a balancing act of, you know, inventory, how much you've got on hand, how that inventory is aging, how to ensure that you're moving product to create space for the next products. And depending on what business you're in, that could also mean creating space for new SKUs that are more of a fit for summer versus a fit for winter. And so when I think about, the elements of how do you set yourself up for Q1 and Q2 is like, I think it really does matter what type of business you're in and whether your business and your product usage is seasonal, right? Because I often find that like some businesses who are really seasonal, who do most of their sales, for example, in the winter, like their job is just to move and push as much product as possible, and they're willing to take a hit on their margins a little bit. Versus others are trying to lay that foundation, right? Say you're a swimwear line and you're getting prepped for next summer, try to lay that foundation for a really, really strong spring, right? To gather new customers, get more impressions. And so what I would say is in the theme of like trying to build customer relationships, I think we kind of have to be in just especially given how customer acquisition costs have gone up and, kind of making sure that your product flies above the stack. I really do think what matters is you trying to build relationships with customers that can last over the long term, right? And even if you're doing things to potentially, for example, break even on the first sale, but knowing that you're going to make money on the second and the third and the fourth, and you're doing the things to build that loyalty and that customer affinity and showing up in an authentic way, like those are the things that are sort of going to lay the path for the spring. The other thing that I think will likely start to happen is, and I think we've already seen it, is like typically part of the reason why people shop so heavy, like this was the original reason behind Black Friday, sales, right? People want to buy stuff when it's on sale. Everybody loves a sale, right? And so, um, I think what we've started to see is the sale period has been expanded, right? In order to get people to try to go over that hump because they love a sale. And so like, now the Black Friday sale turns into Cyber Monday turns into pre-Christmas, turns into January, which turns into the spring sale. So, and by the way, I actually think that's a net good thing for brands because like in reality, you can run same sale in practice in regards to discount, but remasked as a net new sale during a different period and different theme that could potentially drive similar outcomes for you if you capture customer data appropriately, you build strong affinities with your customer, you do the little things that go a long way in regards to like caring about their business, even if that is you writing a note card to that person who wrote a big order, right? Like, a little letter, like those things really go a long way. So capture data, expand your sales season, and then like ensure that you understand whether your business is seasonal or not, and therefore sort of reprioritize from there, whether you're trying to just move product out of the way or build and lay the foundation for a strong spring into summer.
Yeah, on top of that, I think making sure that you're not underselling the importance of cash on hand and cash flow management is really important during this period. Because Dan, to your point, right, like there's a ton of different things that are going to come up over the next 6 months. There's Black Friday, holiday, kicking off the new year without seeing too much of a dip. You want to, let's see if we can maintain this sales volume into January, into February. And a big part of that is making sure that you have available cash to take advantage of opportunities that come along. I've seen a ton of businesses really take advantage of Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and the success that they see during that period begets a new opportunity, right? Perhaps it's a retail purchase order. And because there's been such a focused investment on maximizing Black Friday, holiday, there's not cash in the bank account to then take advantage of a new opportunity. And if you have the right debt relationships, that can work out because it's just like, cool, I can call onto my debt partner and I'm going to be able to take advantage of this opportunity. But at the same time, you're going to run into trouble if you're down to your last 20 grand in the bank account and you're going to a lender and saying, hey, I need 500K right now. So making sure that you're optimizing for cash on hand. And a big part of that is like, can I use debt in advance of the period to make sure I'm investing in those things with other people's money and keeping cash on hand in case I need to jump on an opportunity like yesterday, that you have at least enough cash in the bank to justify the amount that you might need to draw down. And so it's either optimizing cash on hand by not spending too much or by leveraging debt in advance so that you have the capacity to still take advantage of things in the future.
All right, so so it's interesting. I think we've dove straight into like assuming people have a handle on their cash flow, right? Like, well, if I'm a business, to run a scenario past you, I'm a business who, maybe things got busy this fall, right? I got into some new retailers and I'm both e-commerce and selling through retail. And like, I let my books go the last, 2, 3, 4 months, right? And I'm like, all right, like I can either focus on crushing, this period and then deal with the books later because like it doesn't really matter until tax season, or I can figure out how to get them right now. Like, what would you suggest a business do in that scenario? And is it worth them going and investigating and tripling down into getting their books right, understanding their numbers right now? Like, is it worth that investment?
The tale
And
is
why?
old. It's a tale as old as time, right? Like the first thing to go in operations is often financial management. I'm obviously sitting in a position where my take is that the one thing that you should not let go of ever is your financial management and understanding exactly how healthy the business is in the numbers. I've seen businesses get through a period where they're cleaning up their financials after a couple months of, hey, like I just ignored this because I was busy, and realizing something crazy. I did $3 million in revenue in this channel, and that channel was not profitable the entire time. I did $3 million in revenue in this channel, and I spent $3.1 million pulling that off. And so, right, like there's a number of different things that need to be analyzed on like ideally a per sale basis, but at least a period based monthly basis, and maybe not ideally on a per sale basis, but like you want to catch as soon as possible if sale is not profitable and you didn't intend it to be, which I think every business should intend to be profitable from the first sale wherever possible. But if you're, ending a month with an unprofitable channel and you're not catching that right away and fixing it for the next month, it's a really quick way to let yourself clean up your books months later and realize that you're not in a healthy financial position. You operated with a negative net profit, in some cases, even a negative gross profit, which is devastating. Shout out to all the lenders out there. I know you don't want to do a deal with a company with a negative gross profit under any circumstances, but they exist. And so like the risk of letting yourself, get blind to your cash flow position is really that you're creating a less and less healthy business from the story the numbers tell, even if your sales numbers are really healthy, even if your revenue is growing really fast. It's important to remember that like not every investor type is going to see revenue as the North Star. They're either going to see profit, they're going to see healthy cash flow management, they're going to see understanding of the numbers and what the numbers justify as a big part of that. And I know we've talked on the pod before about the fact that like, hey, if you go to a lender and ask for more money than your numbers justify, they're going to decline you and blacklist you. They're never going to work with you because they're like, this founder doesn't understand their numbers. So that increases the risk profile to a level that we're not comfortable with.
And yeah, just in quick is that I think that's such a valuable section, and bringing it together, it's like good monthly financial management gives you the insights to actually make better business decisions, right? Like to your point on a channel not being profitable, like if you don't have those, period, if you don't have that, you can't make a good business decision, period, which would help you become better, more profitable sooner, etc. It's that simple, which yeah, you hit it perfectly.
But I think what I'm taking away from both sides of that, like, perspective for both of you is just like Q4 is a season for amplifying your business. If you're doing good things, it's going to give you more good things, right? And by good things, I mean you're maintaining a good profit margin, you're putting your sales at the right prices, you're managing cash flow and inventory well. That's going to just like be a huge boost for your business. But I also think that if you're not careful and you're not close to your numbers, it's a season that can crush and sink your business. It's a season that can, like, if you're just looking at the top line, how many sales am I making? What's the impact that it can have if your margins are terrible? Is that it breaks your business. And I think that's like the existential part of financial management and financial analysis is like, it's not only about the opportunities, but it's also about survival, especially for like those founders in the early years where like maybe you've had a really great year so far. That's awesome. Make sure that when you're placing that sale, when you're making concessions, when you're expanding even that sales season, as you're saying, DT, that it's like it's in the right way because you know your numbers well enough that you know you're making enough money per sale to justify the effort that goes into it. Let's get into sales and pricing. I know it's a little bit of a leading question because I set it up there. How do you think about a sale? Because you see like 60%, 40%, 30% feels arbitrary sometimes, but
In terms of
everyone has a
discounts.
sale.
Yeah.
Exactly. In terms of discounts. Yeah, thanks for that. But how do you think about setting a discount? And DT, I would love your side to be the marketing side on this. And
Well,
William, I need the like, what are lenders trying to look at on a per item basis?
Brad, well, you start.
All right. Yeah. Well, so one thing I will say is that the discounts line in a profit and loss statement gets a fair amount of scrutiny. Now, less scrutiny than the refunds line in a lot of cases. So you want to see, right, like are people buying your product and keeping it? But when the discounts are really high relative to the revenue, we're talking like a 50%, a 60% discount. What's really important is making sure that the business isn't dipping into a negative gross profit and that the margins stay healthy, right? Like depending on the industry, margins are thin or thick. There's a middle ground, of course, but there's a huge range of what an acceptable gross margin will be in a business. And meaning like for anyone who's not a business owner that's just hanging out with us today, gross margin meaning like here's what I made from the sale, here's what I spent on my cost of the goods sold. So I sell a cup for $10, I paid $5 to create it, ship it to me and ship it to the customer, $5 net is my gross profit. So like if you're in the apparel business, you often have like an 80% gross margin. And if you give a 50% discount on that, your gross margin is still incredibly healthy. What is troubling is when a business offers a sale that is going to take their gross profit down to just like, either a couple percentage points or is gonna, even drop it into the negative. So anytime sales are coming up, the things to look at, and I'm gonna dip into marketing, and Daniel correct me, is like, what is my customer willingness to pay? So like, am I priced correctly from the jump? And if so, I likely don't need a huge discount in order to in order to drive sales. I think that there are companies we've talked about Patagonia on the pod who like don't do a sale and they know that their stuff is priced correctly, so it's all good. But most people will do a sale, and I think making sure that you're pricing your goods at a healthy gross margin and also at a good customer willingness to pay will mean you do not have to discount to the point where your gross margins are falling apart. Now, if you're charging a ton of money for your product and your costs are low and you're going to throw a 60% discount in, I'd also worry about what your customers think. So are the customers being like, wow, they can afford to give me this discount? Why is this so expensive in the first place? So like staying competitive is important, but not sacrificing the financial health of the transaction is way, way more important. And if you have a slightly worse Q4 from a revenue standpoint, because you're maintaining healthy financials, I actually think that's better. I say it all the time. I'd rather have a $5 million profitable business than a $50 million unprofitable business on my hands.
Big facts. Well, can you? Because I'll touch on it, but I actually think you might be in a better position to touch on it. How does your aging inventory play into, like it's something that we do for some of our clients, right? Here at Bags, how would you consider that as a variable for what you're driving sales for?
I mean, there's a bunch of things to dig into on aging inventory. One is, do you have a product with an expiration date? Right, like shelf life matters, and if you have 1,000 units of a product that's going to expire in January, you can discount it to whatever gross profit you can. If you can sell that profitably, that's a win because otherwise we're talking liquidation or a write-off. So typically you might be outside of the window where you can liquidate the inventory because the liquidator's not going to be able to sell it in time. So in that case, you're saying like this is shrinkage is what you would call it in the P&L. And now I'm going to take a massive loss. And it's written in shrinkage is written into cost of goods sold. So then boom, instant negative gross margin. So doing whatever you can to move inventory is really important. Now, if you have inventory aging, meaning you've sat on a SKU, you perhaps over ordered for this SKU. We have a customer who is in the apparel business, and her bestseller is a black unit, and she was getting comment on social media being like, we want colors, we want colors, we want colors. And she saw that and she was like, oh, yeah. And she ordered a ton of stuff in colors, and then she launched it all on the website, like the new inventory released. Bestseller was black by far. Well, still, like nobody bought the colors because like a couple people wanted it, but there was a skew in terms of what the real demand was. And then there's a bunch of inventory there, which is like, do I discount this to the point that I sell it with like some level of profit? Do I discount it unprofitably and hope that my sales of my black will keep me profitable? Or do I liquidate this inventory and take, a big loss on it? But then at least I'm not sitting on an inventory asset that's taking up space in my warehouse, that I'm paying for that space on a monthly basis, that I'm needing to track and amortize over time. And usually that is a decision to make. So, I think there's a bunch of different angles to dig into inventory aging. I think, the key is, right, your cash conversion cycle ties to your inventory aging. If you spend $100,000 on inventory and you're still sitting on that inventory 12 months later, that's $100,000 that you're not getting back into your bank account fast enough. And that's a missed opportunity cost where you could invest that money. So if you can get just $100,000 profit at all, well, you got to think of the opportunity that you have when you have an extra $100,000 to deploy. Strategically, it makes sense to discount and get rid of really old inventory at whatever you can. But from a cash flow management standpoint, let's make sure that the SKUs that you have that aren't really old, that are fresh and are selling at a margin that covers the difference so that you remain healthy from a unit economics, an overall unit economic standpoint, and from what the story that your P&L is going to tell.
I love that. So the only thing that I would add from an understanding, and we're in such an exciting and interesting time from an inventory management, sale perspective, marketing standpoint, because and a really great example of this is Nike. They are pros at understanding what their hero products are and then providing subsequent discounts in real time for the products that aren't selling as fast in order to maximize and get the non-hero products moving at as fast of a pace as their hero products so that they don't sit on remnant inventory. So if they do it on a by color or by SKU basis. It's like phenomenal. And so, but they've got real-time analytics and teams of people, and they spend, I'm sure, tens of millions of dollars just on figuring that out themselves. For you as a small business owner, how I would think about approaching it is, one, look at your historicals, look at last sales holiday season, understand which products move the most, understand over the last year what are the things that people really, really want to buy, right? And then based off of that information, one, obviously ensure that you've got the inventory for the hero things. But then where you don't necessarily have as much demand for those products, I would subsequently tier those discounts accordingly, right? Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, and by the way, there's not a discount isn't the only solution. Technology in e-commerce has gone crazy, and the things you can do to move inventory are really crazy. You think about a BOGO deal, where you can literally set up a little piece of technology and buy one, get one. And it doesn't have to be buy one, get one free, by the way. It can be buy one, get one 10% off, 50% off. And it's cool, I know my hero item's gonna sell, and I'm basically gonna psychologically manipulate my customer, for better or worse, to taking one of the things that's not selling as well, and I'm going to cut it down, and maybe I won't make money on it, but at least I'm moving the inventory out and I'm consolidating it into one shipment. So I'm only paying shipping one time on it. And it's oh, that's amazing. So thinking through all the variable ways you can discount the item that's not selling well, you can tie it to the item that is selling well so that it moves better. You can even think about doing things like co-selling. So can you reach out to another company that has sales where this product might align better with their audience. You obviously want to take care of your early adopters and your core audience, but that doesn't mean you can't tap into other audience segments through partners in order to get the product out there without massively increasing your marketing spend or creating a new channel. So I think like all of those are really smart ways to think about getting that inventory moved, and also just like keeping your own lines moving as is useful for your business.
And then the last thing I would say is use your email database. If you are selling direct to consumer, right, or via your own site, use your email database as a test bed for sales, right? Use that early on, start your sales season a little bit earlier, and see, is it 25% that gets people to go over the hump? Is it 10? Is it 15? Is it 40? Right? See what drives that increased click rate and potentially increased purchase rate early. And based off of that, then go through and really drive it home. And then the last thing I would say, like, part of the goal here is like increasing that average order value, right? The AOV, right? Because like for me, it's like, all right, great. I'm going to spend across all my, call it, let's say I'm going to spend $750. If before I was going to spend $750 on 3 products at your company, but now I'm going to spend $750 and I'm going to get 8 to 10 products, the brand itself might make worse gross margins, but in reality, when you add it all together, great, I'm moving more product, I'm getting an increased average order value, and in turn, I'm sort of stacking those that gross margin on top of each other so that it ends up being a pretty profitable sale. So yeah,
Which I think, no, just to fill the gaps in on one side of that, I don't think we've touched on that much. I think that's like particularly pertinent to physical retail, right? Just like that's what you want to go for. And like how many times have we walked in a store where it's like 60% off and then in small letters, right? Like on select products. And I think you can only get there when you are close to the data, when you are close to your financial management, when you know your business inside and out, and you can say, I think to your point, DT, on the Nike SKUs, it's just like, I can afford an aggressive discount on these 2, a medium discount on this 2, and absolutely no discount on this one. But that combination is what lands me on that 750 plus per customer. And then I think like it's super cool because you're starting to think about your business, your product, not just as product, but as marketing too, right? Because people are wearing it. It's out there. The more it's out there, the more it's seen. And I think like just across the board in any business, your customers are going to be your best advocates if you have a good product, if you have a good service. They're the ones that are going to send more customers your way. And I think that's the kind of a flywheel that you ideally want to kick off. And I think the reason we're talking about it in Q4, in the context of Q4, is because there are so many opportunities to do that right now. And it does kind of trickle through and lead on into the rest or next year. Okay, Will, I promised you we'd come back to it, so we're coming back to it. I'm gonna hand you the mic on lending and hand you the mic on why, it's not too late, because it seems like that's the perspective, and how to take advantage of the numbers you're hitting in this season to set up your funding strategy for next year.
Yeah, always happy to be back on the topic of financing the growth. Yeah, I mean, like, so there's two ways we can talk about this. One is, is this a business that has been strategic about how they use debt and is now in a position where they're starting Q4 with access to capital? There's one. Two is, hey, I'm a business that hasn't been strategic about debt. I've just been, keeping it alive, cash on hand, and now I want to think about debt. Either way, both of those businesses, assuming a successful Q4, should be immediately thinking about what comes next from the debt perspective. A business might have a great Q4 and all of a sudden be eligible for a lending product that they weren't eligible for previously, and want to jump on that because they could see an increase in available credit. I've seen as big as going from 75,000 to 500,000 from this period, one business, in terms of available credit. So let's talk first. I'll talk about a business that has existing debt relationships, consumer products business going into Q4. I think if financial management is dialed in, what you'll have is historical data to analyze on sales volume. You can really look at it from a here's what I spent on advertising, here's what inventory I had on hand, here's another thing to look at, like here's when my hero items sold out. Because the sales data actually is going to underweight the story if you sold out in on November 27th and missed December holidays with that item. So how do you make sure that for a combination of e-commerce and retail that you are prepared from an inventory standpoint? So I'm going to use debt to get inventory prepped for the season. I'm going to use debt because I want to maintain cash on hand to take advantage of opportunities that might come up during the season. And I think there's like a lot of math and assumption that has to go into that. But what's really useful if you have cash on hand is I have all this inventory, and in the case where I over ordered, I can take my cash on hand and invest in January, February, March to just like make sure that I'm getting this moved at some point soon. And if you under order, you have cash on hand in order to say like, cool, I need to do a quick run. Let's see if I can produce inventory in time. And if you can't, then that's okay too. Now, when you're in that position where you have sold your best 2 consecutive months of the year, I think somewhere in the middle there is the time where you want to call bags or call a trusted lending partner, or at least do an analysis of where you can go in the market, talk to advisors, investors, whoever it is. Note that like most VCs are on vacation, so you're not getting that check, but lenders will be working. Lenders typically are working year round. So you have an opportunity to say like, hey, I had my best unit economics performance. And even if you didn't, even if you use discounting and your unit economics are slightly lower, I had the best revenue performance. And ideally, because customer demand is what is increasing during this period, so you should be able to not increase your operating expenses and see more sales. I got profitable for 2 months in a row, or more profitable by a pretty substantial margin. And that's the moment where you want to go and engage with a lender who told you to come back later once upon a time, a lender who has a higher revenue requirement, a lender who can give you a larger facility than who you're currently working with, and lock in that money so that either you can invest in Q1, or you know that you have a facility that will carry you through a good stretch of time in the business until the next big opportunity comes along, whether that is in Q1, Q2, or even if you're just looking to stabilize the business all the way till the next Q4. So that's a business that has debt. I think same thing is true for a business that didn't use debt. Approaching Q4 using just money in the bank to make things happen. Now, that's a business that needs to be way more careful about how they are managing cash flow during the period. The last thing you want to do is get your bank account balance down so low that you don't have a month of operating expenses available, but you have a ton of inventory, right? The important thing about a balance sheet is your asset section is going to include inventory. And so you might be like, cool, I'm cool from an asset standpoint, but like inventory doesn't turn into money like that, right? It takes effort and often cost in order to sell that and turn that into cash on hand. So if you're going to spend all your money on inventory and something goes a little funky, like election noise creates panic, sales are way down, whatever it is, that's going to be a really dangerous position to be in. So you have to be more careful. And what I would powerfully recommend is, because Q4 is expected to be your best time of the year, do the same thing that a business that already has debt is doing and use the power of your results to get access to capital so that you can shore up your cash on hand. I had a business that I was working with recently who had like $1 million in the bank account and wanted to go get a line of credit. And someone in the ecosystem asked me like, why do they want a loan? They want $1 million in the bank. And my answer was like, well, having $1 million in the bank is a phenomenal contingency for investing in growth, that doesn't mean that you want to spend that money on things that are near-term revenue generators. Having $2 million is better than having $1 million, even if you're going to accrue interest on that second million, because you can use that to take care of things that'll generate profit and therefore cover the interest. And so I think that's a really good way to like think about why it's important to go get debt, even if you have cash on hand. You want to keep your cash on hand healthy and go get debt, and those aren't counterintuitive. You don't want to be in a position where you're going to get debt because it's the only thing that's going to keep the lights on. You want it because it's going to be a little extra fuel to invest in your growth.
Completely agree. Yeah, it's the game of leverage, right? Turn $1 into two, maximize cash on hand, de-risk, and invest in the things that drive growth. Well, guys, I think that's it today for the Cash Pod. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, this is the Cash Pod where we talk about all things business growth, how to maximize cash flow, how to leverage financing, and we'll be back for another episode next week.